Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Furkan, product designer working in London. In this video, I'm going to do an in-depth walkthrough one of my design portfolio case studies in my presentation that landed me a job at Big Tech. I made this video around 6 months ago, walking through my design portfolio presentation, but I never done an in-depth look at one of the case studies. Now, making this video 6 months later, it'll be good to get my feedback and thoughts on what I would have done differently as well, and how I would improve this now that things have changed significantly as well. So some background of how do I actually choose a case studies to present. I always pick the stuff I'm most confident and I feel like it's the most relevant to present, and it showcases my best skills. And being at my time at Ford, Tesla only just started on the scene, and there was a massive push in the organization. There's a massive shift towards electric vehicles, autonomous vehicles, and different ways of getting people to move around the cities. It wasn't just about selling combustion vehicles anymore, and I thought with Elon Musk being in the news all the time, it would be really interesting just to show one of Ford's projects or strategies of an interesting direction they're looking to go. So let's head straight into my Figma presentation that I presented and give an in-depth look at the last mile delivery case study. One of my favourite projects I worked on at my time at Ford, mainly due to the impact that I got to make, as well as how much I felt I had learned on the project and how much it really helped me grow. So you can view this presentation by heading the link in the description below and subscribing to my design newsletter. So the first thing I talk about in this case study is I always showcase upfront what's this really about. Is it a desktop app? Is it a mobile app? Is it both? And it just kind of gives the people you're presenting to a bit more of an idea and an explanation of what's going on. And at the time here, this was the main screen that someone really sees, and this is the reason I chose this splash image. And interestingly enough, this was the main stakeholders I got to work with on the project. And being inside Ford, you'd expect such a big company. They've recently launched the F150 Lightning, and it's going to sell like hotcakes, and they might have these massive design teams. But the reality is that depending on what project you're on, there isn't as many designers as you really think across the organization. The flagship app, Ford Pass, has loads of designers, and that's the biggest app. It must have over 100 million users right now. Whereas the project I was on, last mile delivery, was more of an experiment, and it was a 0 to 1 project where I was the sole designer. And that meant that in terms of capital D, in terms of design, you have content designers, user researchers, and then the product designers, but I was the only designer, so I didn't have any content designers. I had previous experience working with copywriters, which is a bit different to content designers, and I guess I was also doing the user research myself. But then today in the team that I work in is that you have dedicated UX researchers and content designers, and it's a totally different dynamic. And I feel look, there's no wrong or right way of doing this. I guess with the constraints of a team being more of a 0 to 1 startup scale up inside Ford, it was different. And I really did enjoy doing the research, and it's definitely something that today I probably want to maybe look back and do more of. And it's a good opportunity, but it means that the project doesn't flow as fast as it could if you have a dedicated UX researcher that's always going out getting those findings for you. And so here, just literally list out the stakeholders you worked with, and depending on the constraints that you have, just mention why. For example, you didn't really have the opportunity to work with a content designer or a data scientist or a product manager. And I just stated the timeline here. So the next slide I talk about is bringing people up to speed straight away with the background of the project in a really simple and effective way. Looking at this, the reason I think this slide works well is because there's a problem where it's really easy for people to resonate with, especially if you live around London, and I was presenting to people around London, and it's easy to understand the congestion problem. The government have these congestion targets and guidelines, and it's easy to explain to people that delivery and couriers cause a lot of this traffic as well, and I feel like that's what works really well. If I was to change one thing, I'd look at having a central metaphor, something that I'm looking more to do in my day-to-day work, to really give people more of a baseline understanding and make it even easier. What is this project all about? For example, a central metaphor could be around a music app, say Apple Music, where we're looking to increase discovery. It should be, for example, discovering music in the virtual world should replicate the experience in the physical world, where your friends are recommending you new music that you love and enjoy. So having a metaphor where it's easy for people to understand can help as well. Maybe for the delivery project, you want to replicate the physical experience of gifting people presents, or you want to replicate that experience of trying to give that delight to people. I feel like that's something that resonates well in this project, and that can help. So after this, I just talked through the customer problem and really just expand on about the whole electric vehicles, and there's a massive push for electrification, especially with the rise of Tesla, something easy for people to understand, and people are really trying to cut emissions down. And this is where I talk through the problem statement, something that's really, I guess, there's loads of problem statements you can talk about inside this project. But then with your case study, what specific problem are you really trying to look at? And I guess when it comes to like product thinking, you also want to have a good understanding of the industry as a whole and how your project really impacts this as well. So here I just talk about the getting vehicles off the road, which is a wider problem we're really looking at here. And this is where I bring people more up to speed with how we're doing this with multimodal delivery. Maybe I'd have a better illustration, a diagram, to help people understand this a bit better. And I guess this is the illustration that I use. I feel like it's pretty simple to help people understand what multimodal delivery is, but it's important to get people to understand this project relies on this new way of delivering parcels. But I haven't really focused too much on the design work just yet, because you really breeze through these slides. And I feel like I wouldn't change a slide. It's something that I'm pretty more proud of, really, just looking back at this. It's been maybe a year since I've been on this project, and yeah, I guess having those real photos really brings things into life and reflects on projects I work on today. I don't really get to see day to day like people using the apps that you design all the time, and it's really been nice to go out there and talk to the people, the customers that use the app, and do the research yourself and see people use the app, and that's always really nice. And it's definitely something I'd encourage other people to do, because it just makes it more human, your projects. So when it comes to structuring the presentation, I recommend using my design project brief template, link in the description below, which you can purchase for $14.99. And the reason I recommend this is because all of these sections allow you to just copy and paste this into your presentation, and they hone in the key points when it comes to delivering your presentation. So we've got the background here. What was the project metaphor? What was the people problem, your business problem? If you've already scoped things like this out in your project, it's going to be a piece of cake when it comes to assembling your presentation. And it's really easy to talk about the milestones, but most importantly, we have things like your evidence, research, and resources. So did you have any data that derived this project, or any user research that came about this project? What do other competitors do? What was your target audience and use cases? Things like this, risks and challenges, all of this is what you want to be delivering in your design portfolio presentation. So purchasing this can really help you shape your portfolio presentation, and as well as having this at the start of your project and filling this in when it comes to making your case studies, you're one step ahead and it's already basically done for you. So I highly recommend this in the link in the description below. So the next slide, and I can't emphasize this enough, is always really have something talking about the impact of what was the result of your project. Talking about this early, I still feel like is a good thing to do when looking back, is because it gets people hooked and interested. Wait, how did he scale this project 10x? That's impressive. Or how did he increase customer satisfaction? And being in the delivery world for this project, it's all about the metrics, all about the amount of parcels you deliver per day, per week, how fast you deliver them per hour. hour, the customer satisfaction rate. So I was really fortunate in that respect. But in the tech world, there's so many metrics you can talk about. Average click-through rate going up, what is called a meaningful engagement, has that gone up? How long average session durations, or have you increased the amount of purchases or the amount of people completed at the end of a journey? If it's more of a 0 to 1 project, is there impact that you had internally when it comes to design system efficiency or the team culture or like the morale? There's so much you can talk about. It's so important to have impact, hook people in early and show your worth. So these are the main metrics that I like to include. There's so many that you can include in your project as well. And next up, after talking about this, we go into the problem statement I focus on this presentation. So I just wanted to showcase that I have a good understanding of the industry as a whole, but let's just hone in the 30 minutes that we've got on a specific problem statement here. So I talked about impact earlier, but how are we actually measuring these, and what are the KPIs for this project as well? And for us, again, I was really fortunate to have these clearly set out for me because of how important it is in the delivery world. So maybe for your project, like I said, if you're scoping this early, you should have some sort of evidence to come about for the project of success metrics. What were the success metrics? And these are really important and something that you can work with your data scientists, with your product managers, to emphasize what is really important here. So every project has constraints, and looking back at this, I could have probably talked about even more details of the constraints that we had, like being the only designer on the team, but there's things like limited budget, time and resource. Again, it's just good awareness to have, understanding the constraints and really honing in on these when it comes to the decisions you make on a project. You can really say, the reason I had to do this is because of these XYZ constraints. And we were working with an external partner in this project, and that's why there's career technical constraints on the way that they deliver the APIs they were using. And this was during the COVID-19, the peak of the pandemic, when it was a complete big unknown, when the pandemic shook the world and we had to carry on delivering parcels because people were at home. And this in itself, I suppose, changed the way people really delivered as well. And it now seems more like the norm of the way deliveries have changed, with the whole taking pictures of things and really not asking too much for like signatures, and like there's now bigger emphasis on collections and people maybe not going to the post office like in person anymore. There's like more of a big emphasis on people collecting things and getting them delivered to their home as well. So that's all like really interesting things. So here were like some of the key principles that we use when designing. I guess like from here, like it depends on your project. Like when it comes to articulating decisions, this is what I really relied on to talk about. Is that these were some of the principles of the projects that I suppose were really something that we had to emphasize and hone in on. And again, I feel like some projects, they don't really have a clear understanding of the principles, and there's other things that you can use really to when it comes to articulating your designs. Is that, are you constrained by the existing design system? Like the projects I work on today use such a big design system internally, and to be honest, it actually constrains you of how you actually go and derive different directions of your design as well. And that's like maybe something that you could talk about. But here I really talk about things like reliability, accessibility and efficiency. Mainly reliability and efficiency because of how important it is for the speed of delivering things. And this is something I suppose where if you don't have any principles when designing, you could talk through some that you have like as a wider organization, or like I said, there's other constraints or like things that have guided your decisions. So after some of these principles where I'm really making design decisions on what can make this app as lightweight as possible for efficiency, as well as making it as fast as possible for them to get through the user journeys and flows and make sure it's as reliable as possible. So after this, what we do talk about is some of the field research. This video is actually on my YouTube channel where you can really walk through this, and I guess looking back, it's not something that you'd probably normally get to do in a company or project day to day, and I was fortunate to do this, and it's actually pretty funny to look back at. So I got to actually understand the delivery world more on a personal level by being able to see how do competitor apps like Uber Eats, like we've got hundreds of thousands of riders, millions like worldwide using their apps, and really I want to understand why is their app so good, and how can it be that people pick up and use this so quickly and easily. I want to really basically get inspiration from this, and I feel like including stuff like this really is just so different and unexpected if someone really showcased this in a design portfolio presentation. And I guess one thing I always emphasize is loads of people in their presentations, whenever they showcase them to me, is that everyone talks about research, which is cool, but no one really tells you like the insights of like, all right, you done research, like, that's a massive thumbs up, but what were the insights that informed your decision? I feel like I could have honed in on this better as well, because I feel like maybe here there's like a few bullet points, but I suppose it would have been even nicer to maybe outline this even more clearly of, look, I've done the research, this is what I specifically learned, and maybe have some like evidence to derive this as well. But I can't emphasize the importance of, look, if you say you've done research, tell us how this has informed the design decisions. I guess this slide here is like, if you do like different milestones for your work, I would have called this maybe milestone 1, milestone 2. Do I really need to talk about the customer needs here as such? They should really just be, the milestones should really have like derived from the customer needs anyway. So maybe I would have improved on this slide a lot more. Paper wireframes, I feel like, yeah, I like paper wireframes, and I don't get to do this too much day to day in like big tech at Meta, because it's easier in my opinion, because I've got such an established design system. Is I'm literally dragging and dropping 5-6 components and I've got a high fidelity mock-up of something, whereas I literally had 0 design systems when I started, so it's quicker for me and more efficient to just start on paper. So I feel like this is more subject to the resources that you have around you. It's not essential to do paper wireframes. The reason I don't talk about this, but now reflecting on this, I would say the reason I've done paper is because I didn't have an established design system, and it's way faster to do mock-up concepts and get feedback on them a lot quicker this way as well. Whereas if you know your way around a big design system, no problem. And this is where not having a massive design system, we have like inconsistency in the wireframes, and to be honest, I would have maybe had a dedicated slide on these to really talk about the actual options more clearly of why I've gone through these different directions, because I talk about these verbally, but reality is you want to have prompts for people to understand how good is this guy at his proactivity and drive in decisions. This is really important, of like proactivity and drive, like how can he actually drive the decisions, and how intentional are you. So intentionality is really important. Like, you was intentional when you worked cross-functionally with, you got feedback from your content designer, you used a researcher, there's been previous research that has shown that maybe this concept didn't really test well for another product, or we've got feedback from the content designer that this copy or this content needs to really like change and it doesn't like scale too well, so maybe you change the way you made decisions here. And I feel like that's something I guess I didn't really get the opportunity to work too much on this project, but when I articulate the decisions of where I iterate through these wireframes, I could have done this way better in the presentation, and I feel like that just comes with practice of how to articulate your design decisions as a person. This, I guess it doesn't look that effective now looking at it again on the slides. It's like, maybe I should have zoomed in particular, but I just wanted to show like thinking about different states for when I was making these designs and cards, and it just shows that you can think through like different iterations and states of things. Like, you're not just looking at the positive flow for things as well. And then accessibility here, and it's always good to really have slides on this, but these are just core cliche. I wouldn't say like they're really cliche, but they're just really basic in terms of accessibility, like AAA color palettes. Talking about using plain English guidelines, not having a content designer, I feel like that is a +1 for me to understand this as well. And I was coming up with a copy myself, so that is something I feel like is like pretty good to talk about. Icons, I feel like looking back, I'm glad I had the opportunity to do this because it was super fun, and I love this type of work, and it's good to really showcase that you have more of a variety of experience when it comes to designing as well. One thing I'd add about creating icons is, look, it's not a requirement for any product design role to really have the ability to do this, but it just really showcases your craft and really what you have more of an interest in as well. And if I had the opportunity, I'd love to be able to work on things like this again. And the icon work, when you always look back on stuff like this, it's one of those where you're like, I could have done that better, and there's always just things where you're like, that icon doesn't look too great, but I feel like it just really separates you out and showcases more to your skills as a designer. And we're coming towards the end of the portfolio case study, and this is probably the most important bit really, which is the prototype. I can't emphasize enough of like, people have so many static screenshots, and when you go through a case study, it does get quite cumbersome when people are just really going through slides and slides and slides. Having a prototype can really make it more engaging and showcase multiple things. As I say, in a picture can showcase 1,000 words, while a prototype is the same thing. So let's dive into this prototype experience. So here we are, the last bit of the prototype of a presentation, and what I do is I just walk through the core user flow of the happy path, and I made sure that it was working really well end to end, talking through the different edge cases. So if someone wanted to play on this after the presentation, they could. So if they clicked on drop to, what happens? Oh, this person's like thought about this as well. And it says you have to action all the deliveries, you can go back, and making sure everything really in this core flow that you can actually click on works. So I'll quickly just skim through this and showcase how that works. So the way it works is that you deliver the parcels. I feel like there was a bit of a bug, I remember in the presentation, that the key lines really didn't show too well, but here is just showing the parcel information, and then I said like, this is a perfect delivery, so the person's in, so they scan the parcel, and then I was justifying like why I made a fixed button at the bottom and it's sticky when you scroll, because of the ergonomics of where your thumb is. And now looking back at this project, I had a lot of freedom and control when it came to design and articulating all these decisions. Like, you get to just make them so fast, so quick, and I guess like you move a lot faster on some of these like 0 to 1 projects, because there's so many screens and parts of the app if you're doing the whole end-to-end app to do. But some of these decisions, you don't get as much time to derive them, as well as that when you're using an established design system, some of the components and decisions are made for you looking back at this. So I'm pretty like pleased that I really came up with some of these decisions of having this like fixed button when you scroll, and then you have your scan parcel, and then we're using some like iOS native modal components that pop up here, and then showcase some of the icon work and the reasons, like classic list item screen, nothing too fancy going on here. And I guess this was like talking through the COVID, like changing the way you deliver with, you now have to take pictures, so like just showcasing this flow as well. And then this like animates out and like pushes you to the next one, and you basically just do the same stuff. And I feel like the reason it was important just to talk through the edge case of like the perfect flow, and then you can talk through something else like the collection isn't in. So again, it's about articulating your decisions of why is there red text here. Like, there was like some research that basically people didn't understand that if you selected one of these reasons, the collection wouldn't actually be tried again. So we want to make people aware of things like this. And if and then you wanted to make sure, for example, adding extra friction, like all of this was intentional, and that's what you want to really derive in your presentation, the intentionality of your decisions. Why does this modal pop up? Why was there red here? So it makes people clear, actually I am happy to fail this and it won't be tried again as well. So all of this was quite intentional to do as well, and that really helps. And then a bit of delight here, we had a bit of animation that we got to work on as well on this project, showing a broader skill set. But that was the main case study really looked at there. So when you talk about slides, after that I go on to the next case study, talking through the flagship Ford app, which is used by the F150 Lightning, the Mustang Mach-E, the Ford Pass app. But that's last mile delivery, a really in-depth look. I know it's been a longer winded video, but the whole point was I want to articulate what I was trying to hone in and why I showcase certain things and what I was really trying to tell people in my story when I was delivering this presentation. At the end of the day, it's a story that you want to deliver, and there's points that you need to be hitting. And this was so important when it comes to the presentation. And looking back at this, there's some things that I've called out that I would change and that I would really emphasize more in as well. But if you purchase this case study design portfolio presentation, in the link in the description below, you'll be able to get all of this stuff for free as well. So the last few points I want to talk about is what would I have done differently now reflecting 6 months later. And if I could change a few things, it would be having a dedicated UX researcher to go out into the field and get the findings and articulate that to the rest of the team on a full-time basis. As whenever I went out to the field, it meant the design work would be paused in terms of the visual design and execution, as well as working on some of the user flows. But then if I had a dedicated user researcher, they'll be able to get the findings and find out the problems constantly and present this to the wider team, and that would have really helped everyone really go towards a more central vision of the project and understand the problems that we're facing, instead of only having research maybe once a month or once every 6 to 7 weeks, which really wasn't sufficient because of how fast the project was moving. And another thing, I would like to have a content designer to help really improve the copy, to articulate what the project and the screens are trying to actually achieve. Having someone to really think through this and having more intentional copy can help really make the flows a lot faster. And I guess it would have been nice to have more of a seasoned knowledge and expertise of working closely with the engineers to understand more of their constraints. So those are the things I'd like to have improved on. But when it comes to this research presentation, it's not always about showcasing like how good you are as a designer. It's more also about showcasing, can you hit these points when you're delivering a presentation, because you're not just about there to showing your visual design skills. You need to be showing proactivity and drive. You want to be showcasing your intentionality to make decisions. You want to be showcasing your product thinking and all of these other skills as well. Thank you so much for making it to the end of this video. I hope you found some of these tips useful. Be sure to comment down below your favourite tip, give this video a thumbs up, and subscribe for future design related videos, and I'll catch you all in the next video. Peace out.